This is the first in a 7-video series on our 7 modes of our major key. I want to cover a couple different things today. First of all, I want to cover an introduction to what our modes are, and then I want to cover our first mode, Ionian. Our modes can be kind of daunting for people oftentimes. They have weird names, there's all kinds of funky scale degrees. It can seem like a lot to remember and a lot to juggle in our head. And my goal with this series is to distill this down to something that's very manageable, and for you to walk away from this understanding that our modes are actually very simple. And although it can seem like a lot on the surface level to retain, it's actually quite easy, and the theory behind it is very simple. So what are our modes? All our modes is we're taking our major key, our major scale, and we're going to start that scale on different scale degrees. So for example, if I play a major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If I start that major scale on our first scale degree, our first note, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it just gives me a major scale, right? I'm starting a major scale on the first note of a major scale. No surprise there. If I start on, let's say, the second note of that major scale, so instead of starting on do, I'm going to be starting on re. So I'm going to skip do, and we're going to go re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re. That gives a completely different order of whole steps and half steps. Therefore, it's a completely different scale, and we're going to be able to derive different chords from that scale. With me so far? So the theory behind it is simply that. We're taking our major scale and we're going to be starting that major scale on different scale degrees. It's going to give us very different scales, therefore, and it's also going to give us very different chords that we can extrapolate from those different scales. That's the theory behind our modes. We have 7 different modes because we have 7 notes in a major scale. We can start on each one of those 7 notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and ti. Our first mode that we're going to cover is called Ionian. Ionian is just a major scale, right? No surprise there. We're starting a major scale on the first note of our major scale. So Ionian is just another name for our major scale, for our major key. Our regular old major key, when we talk about the chords in a major key, we're talking about Ionian. Ionian is just the proper name of that key. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start on, we'll do all of this in relation to C major, just so we can really understand how these notes are interacting with each other. And C is a great place to start because if we were imagining these notes on a piano, C major is all our white keys, right? There are no sharps or flats. There are no accidentals. And if we're starting C major, C Ionian, we're starting with C Ionian, that means all of our other modes that will follow are going to have those exact same 7 notes. Stands to reason. So we're not going to have any other sharps or flats brought into the equation. It's all going to be our natural notes. So if I start on the first note of C, C, and I play my C major scale, that gives me do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That gives me C major, C Ionian. Now we know from previous lessons that what we can do from there, once we have our major scale, is we can then take chords out of that scale. We can go through it through a process of keeping a note, skipping a note, keeping a note, skipping a note, keeping a note, and we can extract chords from that scale. What that does, keep, skip, keep, skip, keep. Then I start on the second note, keep, skip, keep, third note, and so on. That gives us this order of triads, this order of 3-note chords. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So that right there is the order of triads, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, that is in C Ionian, C major. Now, what we can do is we can go one step further from there. We can add in our 7 like we've done in previous lessons. So now I'm going to go keep, skip, keep, skip, keep, skip, keep, putting that 7 in as well, right? We just added one more skip a note, keep a note to that rotation, and that gives us this, which is a C major 7. So if we want to go through that same process for all of the 7 chords in the key of C major, C Ionian, that's going to give us this: C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, and B half diminished, or B minor 7 flat 5. I'm going to call it half diminished for this series just to keep it simple. So that order right there is what we get of 7 chords: major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished. Now, if for every one of our 7 modes, we had a completely random order of triads or 7 chords, it would be really confusing. It would be so much to remember. The good news is that's not the case. What's going to happen, because it's the exact same 7 notes, in the same sequence, just starting at a different point, right? Instead of starting on the first note, for example, our first mode, Ionian, our second mode would just be starting on the second note, which means that order of whole steps and half steps is consistent. We're just starting on a different place, okay? We're just starting in a different, a very useful way to imagine a lot of things in music, but in this case our modes, is to imagine it as a clock face. Now if our first mode, Ionian, is up here, right? We have our sequence of whole steps and half steps that make up Ionian around that clock face. And as we move through the different starting points, the 7 different starting points we can have, because we have 7 different notes in a major scale, it's going to keep the same sequence of whole steps and half steps. We just start on a different point of that clock face. So that's a helpful way, I believe, to visualize what's going on here. To do a quick recap of what we've covered in this first lesson, our modes are simply taking that order of whole steps and half steps that build a major scale, and therefore a major key, and start on different points, different notes within that scale to give us a different order of chords and different kind of scale at the end of the day, right? Because if we start on a major scale on a different scale degree, let's say the second note, re, that gives us a completely different scale because the order of whole steps and half steps is now completely different. That's the theory behind our modes. From there, we discussed our first mode. Our first mode, we already know. If we know our major key, which a lot of us do, or you can go back and we can visit previous lessons where we've touched on this. I have a video in my beginner acoustic guitar series on our major key. That's everything. That's our first mode of our major key, is Ionian. In the following, in the lessons following this, we're going to be talking about the remaining 6 modes that we can get out of our major key. I hope this video was helpful. Stick around for the next one. I appreciate you watching.